Well, we are continuing our sermon series on navigating right side up in an upside down world. Uh, it's truly, it speaks well, like that's really the right thing, navigate. I feel like if we're ever in a season of navigating what it means to navigate or how to move in this upside down world, today is like this is a relevant message for our season. And so we've looked at a few things to do that. And I believe the truth is we're all navigating through life, and we are, no matter what season you are. If you have young children, you're learning to navigate with young children. If you're in going to school, you're learning to navigate through that. So how do you navigate in a right way? And so we've talked about a lot of stuff. We just want to kind of reaffirm some of the stuff that we've talked about. To do that, to do right side up, I really believe this really is the heart of the idea is really a servant, as a servant leader. Jesus set out, if you're going to be greatest, be the least. And so the heart is that we want to learn as in a servant model, that we want to lead out that way in that we are furthering the gospel and doing what God asks us to do. But that's really our position here is really servant. And so he says, be a learner. This means to lean in with curiosity when it would be easier to be cynical and critical. So we're leaning in instead of giving our opinion, where we live in a day where that's very easy to do and everybody has an opinion. We're learners. We're like, why is this happening? And really why, so that we can help, that we can add something to it. And then we grow relationships and develop systems to help us make good, godly decisions. So we're gonna navigate through life. We're gonna navigate through this season of life, and all of us are in a new season that we've never been in, right? All of us are navigating in a new area of life, in a new season than we've ever been, and so we need to grow relationships. People help you. People give you direction. No one is self-made, and people pour into you. People guide you. Some of the greatest decisions in my life have been by people that have given me good, sound advice, that want the best for me. And so we talked about that. Then we also looked at actively looking for opportunities to help others. So really, we're on mission. We're just not just hope this thing works out. We have a mission. We do have a mandate as Christ followers. We have a mandate that we are to get the gospel to whosoever, right? We have a mandate. There is a mission, and we will be accountable to that mandate. And so it's not our mandate. It's not something that I just one day decided to throw on us. It's actually God, Jesus' mandate as he was floating into heaven, right? So it's pretty impressive, you know. And so we have that mandate to go preach the gospel and to help. And so we, as a church, we want to be known as a church that plants churches. That's why we have a residency program that we're starting. That's why we're doing all the things we do. That's why we have a leadership retreat, is because we want to develop leaders. We want to see the gospel to the ends of the earth. We really do. And so what we want to do is, so we're looking for opportunities to help other people. We want to be a servant leader at the very core. And really, truly, I believe that's the only way to lead. Is if you really want me to follow you, you can tell me what to do, and my wife can get away with that for a while, you know. But after a while, you start bossing me around. It's like, I'm going to say no just to say no at some point, right? It was amazing. There was a transition in my life when I was in high school. So I'm the youngest of four in my family. And they were all telling me, because they would have to wake me up. I was the baby, so they did everything for me. And they're like, you're never going to do anything yourself. Well, once they stopped telling me what to do, it was amazing how I had to be responsible for myself. And I actually did. I wasn't late for school. I did the things I was supposed to do. So you can do that. But the idea behind is really looking for opportunities to fulfill what God's called us to do. And then I really think about it. So I often look at this. I look at the kind of man that I want to be when it's almost over. What is it going to look like? And I think, man, wouldn't it be great to be a person that was curious your whole life instead of critical? Be somebody that was had all these relationships, and you could talk to old friends and people that have poured into your life. All these great men and people, women that have been in your life and relationships and these systems. I mean, I just look at that, and then I think of maybe the people that I had opportunity that did greater things than I could ever imagine, because I was there at the right moment just to help them a little ways, just serving other people. I mean, that would be great. And then I think of generosity. Some of the greatest people in my life, the people that I admire the most, are the most generous people you could ever ask. They'll give you the shirt off their back. They're just giving people. And it started really, I think, of my grandpa. My grandpa he was a very generous man to me, at least to me. He always gave me money. It was so much that, I grew up in a broken home, and so I'd go visit my dad on the weekends for a while, and then it was just kind of messy in that way. But I'd always want to go to Grandpa's because he'd give me money. So I kind of remember a little bit. My mom kind of probably colored in the details, but I'm laying on the couch, and I wasn't going to go. But I told my sisters, like, get Grandpa, get the money from Grandpa. My mom put a stop to that really quickly, but he was generous. Another thing I remember is there was a watermelon. We'd have honeydew or watermelon I'd eat with my grandpa. And what he'd do is he'd cut that thing in half, and he'd give me half of the watermelon. Like, just give me this whole watermelon, pretty much. I mean, I just remember when you're like the youngest of 4 and then the youngest of like 14 cousins, right? You're lucky to get a little chunk of watermelon. And so I just remember those. But generosity. And the people that I love and I think of have helped me in my life, just generous people. People that they're not selfish, they're not like, you got to get your own. They're just like, here you go. And I've always admired that, and I want to be that kind of person. And I really feel like that if we're going to navigate through this upside-down world, I think Jesus really, truly lived out a generous life. Right? God loved the world that he gave, right? That's what we believe. We believe that Jesus gave his life. Like, Christianity is all built around generosity. And that's generosity with your time, with your talent, and even your treasure. Just being generous. Just, I have enough, you take what, you have some. I have enough. And I really believe that. I think my kids, I try to instill that into them. And again, I really think that's done by example. So I think if we're going to navigate right side up in an upside down world, I believe we need to learn to give generously to further the mission and bless others. I really do. And I really believe that Living Hope Church should be known in this community as a generous church. Man, that is the most generous, loving people. They will give the shirt off their back. I really do, and I think I think we live to that. I do think we are a generous church. And so a couple people, and I really think people matter. And when I think about this, so I think of Miss Jean. She was a lady I actually got to go see her last January. Got to go visit Miss Jean. She was one of the first people I met before I gave my life to Christ. And we were at my mom was moving into this apartment, and we were sitting there, and we were hot and tired, and she offered us a soda. But she was always generous to us. She was a very sweet lady. And I didn't take it because I just don't take things from people that ask me. I'm like, no. But I remember that really started a relationship. But she would always give. She gave to the church we served in. She gave her time. She just was very generous. And she's one of the people that helped me and my wife. And because of her generosity, there was a season when she gave me some advice that I was willing to listen to because of her history of generosity. Really, it was, because she proved to be a generous, kind person, and that just really what me. And then I think of my pastor, the guy that I was under. Him and I are like opposite in a lot of ways. He's like, Snyder, you don't call me Snyder. I love Pastor Wayne, but he's like, what do you do around here? He'd always have that. But one thing about the man, he's kind of crusty on the outside, but he was the most generous man I've ever met in my life. I first met him, we just moved to Memphis, and we walked to church, and he's like, he found out where we were from. He's like, Idaho, where in the world is that? But then he shakes my hand, and probably for the first 5 times I met him, he'd put $100 in my hand. He'd give me $100. He's like, spend it on that. And then he was just always giving. And then as we had kids, and he's like, you keep having kids, I'm going to go broke. Because he'd give kids, he'd give presents. He actually even, he's like, I'm forgetting their birthdays, but he's like, here's a Christmas present. And so we went back to Memphis, and he gave money. He actually really is like a grandfather to my children. But just generosity. And then I think of actually a guy that really helped us when we moved here. We had sold our house. We were trying to sell our house. And Jimmy Roberts was a man that actually, and this isn't normal. This isn't a normal thing. We were like, we really didn't, the church wasn't really settled. Nothing was really, we didn't know if we were going to make it or break it. It was just kind of really unsettling. But he was a member of this church, not this church, but he was a member of the church that was here, and he was moving back to Texas. And what he did is he said, you can buy my house at the market value, and we'll hold the loan. He was that gap, where he held the loan for us while we could get this thing, going. And again, just the generosity of that. He didn't know me, he didn't owe me, and we probably, we would be living in an apartment still in Central Point, maybe, but just the generosity, and that's just a few. That's just a few people that have really stepped into my life. And so when I think about it, if I want to navigate through this life, I truly want to be known as a generous person. Plus, I want to be a part of the mission. I want to be a part of I want to be a part of what God's doing. And so we're actually going to look at in Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, chapter 9, verse 6 through 12. Paul he starts bragging about the church of Corinth. Now, the Church of Corinth is kind of like our church. It was a messy church. There's some scandals in it. You should read the first letter of Corinthians. You're like, man, they did what? There was somebody in that church that was actually I don't know. There's just a mess. I don't even want to get into it right now with children in here. It was just, you should read it, okay? Just read 1 Corinthians. You're like, they did what? What's going on? And so, but there comes in. Paul's writing these letters. He'd actually been with this church for about 3 years. He poured his life into them. His generosity. He knew this church family. And so he's like, hey, I've got some people from Macedonia coming down, and I want you to give them a gift. I've been bragging about how generous you are, and now it's time to show, right? It's kind of like with your kids. You're like, okay, someone's coming over for dinner, put on the show for us. No fighting with your brothers and sisters. You do what I know you can do, and you better do a good job. So he's kind of giving them some information. And then he gives some direction and some things we can remember when we think about generosity, and we think about giving, we think about giving our time, talent, or treasure in any principle. There's a couple principles we want to gain. First of all, this is the fact. You reap what you sow. You reap what you sow. You look at what he says. He says, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whosoever sows generously will also reap generously. Okay? And that principle is actually throughout Scripture. It says in Galatians, Paul writes to another church, he says, do not be deceived. Galatians 6:7, he says, God cannot be mocked. A man reaps what he sows. So whatever you're sowing in your life, you will reap it, right? So if we sow apple seeds, we get apples, right? Again, Johnny Appleseed just come to my mind right there. And if we sow corn, guess what? We're going to get corn, right? And guess what? The truth is you always reap more than you sow. So what Paul says is right in Corinthians. He says, if you sow sparingly, you're going to reap sparingly. You're not going to get as much as you think. And it always increases. And so we want to just know that principle, that you reap what you sow, and then you reap more than you sow. And so in Matthew 19:29, the writer Matthew says this. He says, everyone who has left houses and brothers or sisters or fathers or mothers or children in the fields for my sake will receive 100 times as much as he will inherit eternal life. And so he said, look, you will reap what you sow. Jesus taught that. So when it comes to generosity, when it comes to giving, when it comes to this principle, this idea, is that there's a few things that we want to just cover today. That truth, first thing is your heart matters when you give. Your heart matters when you give. Another point is you cannot outgive God. And we'll talk about it. Paul actually mentions this. And then people will thank God because of what you give. Okay? So a few things. So we go to verse 8 of 2 Corinthians. So Paul is, again, let's start verse 7. So he says, hey, you reap what you sow. Verse 7 says, each of you should give what have decided in your hearts to give. You decided in your hearts to give, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves cheerful giving. So this team from Macedonia is coming down. Hey, you should give. You should give. That's his suggestion. He's given some guidance. And then what he said, hey, let it, your heart giving he's not reluctantly, not like you don't have enough, or he says, or under compulsion, like you're being forced. Think about it. So the kids got in a fight the other day, and I told them to hug and kiss each other. Do you think that was meant affectionate or really? No, right? No, you know what it's like. If you have parents, you know, or if you're a parent, you know what it's like. You know, one of them starts licking their lips, they're like forced, and then the other one makes it a game, right? But again, the idea is they're being forced to do it. And again, giving, generosity is never forced, right? Have you ever been invited to somebody's house where the wife didn't want you to come? It's better to not go. It's better not to go, right? Because she's not going to, you might get burnt toast or whatever, right? It's not a fun place to go. And yes, I have experienced that. If she doesn't want you to go, it's better not to go, okay? But again, so when it comes to giving, it really is a hard issue. It's a hard issue. He says each of us should give and decide in your heart, not reluctantly or under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And I really think there comes a point when if you're a generous person, you have to just kind of look at your life and just see the goodness of God in your life. And see what God has done in your life. It should be a moment of praise. Man, God has been good, and now I have an opportunity to be able to show how God's been good to me. It really is. And it's a cheerful giver. I love giving gifts to people I love, right? I love it. I love giving my wife gifts. I love giving my kids gifts. I love it. I love seeing their expression on their face. I just love it all. I don't ever feel guilty giving gifts, and usually, you go too much, right? You're like, oh, but I do. There's just a point, and I think when it comes to giving to God, when it comes to giving to others in obedience to God, I think it's the same attitude. I think there should be a heart of cheerfulness and good and great, okay? And so, you're glad to be a part of what God's doing. It's encouraging. Listen, I love helping Jordan succeed. I do. I love to see him grow as a person. I love giving him my time. Why? Again, I think he's learning to be a good steward of that time, but I love to see where he's been to where he's going, right? There's a part of me that wants to be a part of his journey. And again, if you want to love something, give. Right? Jesus said himself, he said, hey, where your heart, where your treasure is, your heart will be found also. So you want to know where your heart is, that's where your treasure is, right next to it, right? What you love. I just watched one of my favorite movies, Frequency. I don't know if you've seen that. It's a great movie. I'm just putting a plug in there for you to watch a good movie. But anyway, there's a moment where this guy, they hit a baseball, and it lands on his new car. It's like Beamer, his BMW. He's like, my car! Why would he be so concerned? Because that's his treasure. His heart's there, right? And so again, the first principle, your heart matters when you give. It's a hard issue. It's a hard issue. And so God says, hey, do it out of a cheerful heart. And then number 2, you cannot outgive God. Verse 8, he says, and God is able to bless you abundantly. When it comes to generosity, when it comes to giving to others, there comes a point where you can't outgive God. And I believe that wholeheartedly. God is able to bless you abundantly so that in all things, at all times, having all that you need, you will abound in every good work. Did you hear all the alls in that? Paul's saying, hey, listen. And Paul had a history of walking with God. And he says, listen, he will bless you abundantly so that in all things and all times. Now, there's seasons where we go through, but we're trusting God. We're in obedience to God, and we're being part of that. And we just trust that God, you can't outgive him, that he knows what you need best. And then there's that faith aspect in that when you give. And so he says, he goes on, he says, as is written, they freely scattered their gifts to the poor, their righteousness endures forever. Now, verse 10, now he who supplies the seed to the sower and the bread for the food will also supply the increase and increase your store of seed and will enlarge the harvest of your righteousness. And he's saying, listen, as you give to this church, this family that's coming down, or these people that are coming down from Macedonia, you're going to give. And he says, I want you to give sacrificially because you know the God that you're giving to. You know how good he's been to you. And listen what he says. He says he supplies the sower the seeds to sow, and the bread and the food will supply, and will increase your store. So he knows all your needs. He can keep you where you need to be. He knows and I believe God blesses generosity. That's what Paul just taught. He just said that. He says he blesses it. He will enlarge your harvest and enlarge your harvest of your righteousness. Or let me read it again. Increase your store of the seed and will enlarge your harvest for your righteousness. And so God multiplies what we give. He multiplies. He's generous in that. So you can't outgive God. And then what I think the part that really helps us, or makes me proud about being a part of something when you're showing generosity. He says people will thank God because of what you give. I think of the people that have given to me, and I think of the lady that decided to help fund my way through Bible college. Again, this was years ago, and you say, you're not much of a preacher. Well, I wasn't even much of a preacher then, okay? So it was a long way. I was a long ways to go. But for whatever reason, she's like, hey, I want to be a part of what you're doing. I want to be a part of it. And so I was blessed by her generosity. And so what she did was she said, for every class that you take, I'll pay half of that. I'll pay half of whatever your class you're going to take. And I didn't ask her. Her generosity helped pay my way through Bible college. And so we see that. So what the truth is, I'm still mentioning her today. She's still part of it. And when I think of things I'm doing and think of the investment she made in my life, that it changed a lot for me. It changed a lot for me. It helped me. And so when we think, people will thank God because, and I thank the Lord for using her. I thank the Lord. And so it brings us back to that. And so look what he says in verse 11. He says, you will be enriched. So as you give, Paul's talking to them, as you give to them, you'll be enriched in every way, so that you can be generous on every occasion. And through your generosity will result in thanksgiving to God. They're going to look at what you've done, and they're going to give God the praise for it. They're going to give God praise. Thank God that this happened. Have you ever done that when you got something you didn't expect, and you're like, man, thank God. You know how many times I got that $100 that was our only $100. My pastor did not know that. It was my only $100. He'd shake my hand, and I would be like, so there came a point where I just hunted him down. No, I'm kidding. Hey, he didn't shake my hand, No, but the idea was there was moments where that was our only $100. It was our only $100, and he didn't know that. But man, and again, I would say that we were praising God. I would tell Mom, she's like, oh, thank God. Like, it really helped us in our faith walk, in our mission, and what God wanted us to do. And it helped us see that God sees us. God sees that it's not easy to be the recipient of other people's gifts. It's not. But these guys traveling from Macedonia, they were in need. Paul's like, hey, I know this church in Corinth. They can bless you. They want to be a part of what you're doing. And I know the people there, and I want to know. You go see them, and they'll have a gift ready for you. And so there was a sacrifice. There was a part of what God was doing there, and then the praise went to God. And so this sums it all. As we give generously to further the mission and bless others. That's why we give. That's why we are part of what we're doing here at Living Hope Church. Is we're a part of God's mission. We want to see churches be planted. We want to see lives be changed. We want to see this valley come to know Christ. That's my heart, is that they would have the same joy and peace that I have, that we could walk with them where they are, that we could help them know Jesus, be known, and own their faith. That's what I'm giving to. I want to see the gospel furthered. I want to see the Engage campus impacted. I want to see SOU, those students reach for the glory of God. I want to be a part of that. And I want to be a part of what God's doing through Eureka and through this residency program. Like, all of this is the Lord, please help me be a part of what you're doing, because I want to be a part of that, okay? And so as we do, verse 12, he says, this service that you perform is not only supplying the needs of the Lord's people. It's not just taking care of that. He says, but also overflowing in many expressions of thanks to God. Because of the service by which you have proved yourselves, others will praise God for the obedience that accompanies your confession of the gospel of Christ. He's saying other people will be reached with the gospel. By what you're doing, by what you're investing. He's like, other people will be reached for the gospel. Other people will be grown up and reached for the gospel and sent out to fulfill what God's calling. He's saying this is not just about the need, it's about what God's doing, the greater mission of this. And that's why give generosity to further the mission and to bless others. It's both. It's both. He says, and for your generosity in sharing with them and with everyone else. Verse 14. And in their prayers for you, their hearts will go out to you because of the surpassing grace God has given you. Thanks be to God for his incredible gift. It really all sums down to the gospel and the gift. What the reason why I give to what the Lord's doing, the reason why is because I believe the gospel is worth investing in. And I want to see lost people, broken people, unchurched people, de-churched people, people that don't want to be in church. I don't want them just to come to church. What I want them is I want to be impacted by the gospel. I want to see their lives changed. And the reason why is because I had that great gift of a life change. He says, thanks be to God to the indescribable gift. The childhood that I had and the childhood that my children have is far different. Why? Because of what Jesus has done in my life. Because of what Jesus has done in my life. They don't live the same life that I grew up in. They don't live in that. And that is an undescribable. I would just pay for that, right? Like that is worth it. That they don't know the things that I had to grow up in. They didn't experience some of those things. Some of those heartaches or hurts. And so imagine if we invested and we reached another family. There are more Sean Snyders out there that maybe are little kids or whatever. That's why I want to be a part of those kind of ministries, because there's other people that no one's looking at that we as a church that we can be a part, we can impact for the gospel that they could change their life. So as we see this, we see that your heart matters when you give. It is a heart issue. It is a heart issue. And my heart is, I just want, Lord, it's yours. I trust you in this. I want to be a part of what you're doing. You can't outgive God. Look, I've seen God bless me and others as they give and trust the Lord with generosity. I just know you can't outgive God. You can't. And then people will thank God because of what he gives. And that's really what the praise should go to. It's not because I'm awesome. Like I give, oh yeah, you're awesome. No, it's not because of any individual. It's because God gets the glory through our generosity. And then finally, I think as we navigate right side up in an upside down world, I truly believe that as we give generously, we get to be a part of God's mission and we get to bless other people. How encouraging it is to see other people thrive by our obedience. Just to see other people just seeing someone else go further than they ever expected, and that you have a small part in that through giving. Maybe that's your time, maybe it's your talents or your treasure, but that's why we give. And so as we look at this, as we kind of sum it up again, as we navigate right side up, we want to be a learner. We want to be curious, not critical or cynical. We want to have relationships. We want to develop relationships and systems that help us make good godly decisions. And then we want to actively look for opportunities to help others. And then really, to sum it up, that really what our heart is we want to learn to give generously to further the mission or the gospel, right? Further the gospel and bless others. And so I want to be, when it's all said and done, two things I would love to hear. Man, that Sean, he's such a generous guy. Wouldn't it be great that he's just generous. He just loves everybody, and man, he'll give the shirt off his back. Like that would be ideal for me. And guess what? I'm going to learn to do that. I'm going to try to live to that. And then the other one is that Living Hope Church. That Living Hope Church, boy, they are a generous group of people. And they love the lost, and they're willing to give sacrificially and lovingly to see other people come to Christ. What a praise that would be. So let's pray.